Hello guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls. It's me, Big Mike, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Coffee with Big Mike, the series where I sit down for a chat with some rather interesting and amazing people over a nice cup of coffee. Joining me today is Jamil, the developer of Superstar Shooter 16 and the man behind JD Video Game Productions. And if that sounds like you're something you've heard before, I assure you, you are not experiencing deja vu. Jamil was my very first guest here on Coffee with Big Mike. Welcome back, Jamil, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me back. It's great to be back.
It's great to have you back, man. Let me tell you what, for those who don't know, Jamil has been one of the key players in what success I have here on YouTube and on Twitter. So Jamil was the very first game dev that kind of took a chance on me. He was the first one to let me try out his game for free. He was also the first one to give me advice on how to better interact with the indie dev community. So Jamil is not just a friend, but somebody I am in a great deal of debt to. So this having him back today is very exciting for me.
That means a lot to me. And you're the first person to interview me about my game, so I actually appreciate that. But I always try to be good to the people around me, so saw you on Twitter and we got to chatting, and I gave you a whole bunch of little tips and tricks for dealing with indies on Twitter, getting more engagement. And yeah, it's awesome. I've seen you have a big screenshot Saturdays, tons of people posting on that, so it's awesome, man, that you're helping promote indies. Super good.
And I have you to thank for that, because I had no idea what Screenshot Saturday or Wishlist Wednesday was before I met you, and so that really helped out a lot. And it's grown so much over the years. Like when I first started Screenshot Saturday or Wishlist Wednesday, I would get maybe 15 replies, 20 replies, and now sometimes I go to check it and it's 70 to 100 replies, and I'm like, whoa. Ooh.
Nice, man.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super good. Yeah.
It's been a while since we last talked to you, so how's it been going?
It's been good. It's been good, man. I've been working, moved, always working on the game, just about every weekend, been doing that. So, yeah, man, life's been pretty darn good. Now, how are things by you?
Thanks.
Sorry.
So no worries. Things actually are really heating up for me. This is my busy time of the year in regards to making my content. So many game-related things going on, so many things going on with TV shows I like. Also, there are a lot of happenings in the world that really got my attention now that I'm trying to follow. So things are really in the high gear at the moment. But before we get too far into that, I have a listener out there, and she always likes to know what we're drinking. So I like to try to start every chat off with mentioning that. So are you drinking anything today?
Man, I'm water fasting. I gotta, I'm so sorry. I gotta, I'm going to bed in about an hour after this, right? And I don't want to wake up to pee, so I'm drinking nothing. If it was in the morning, I'd have my coffee. I love coffee, but so sorry, dude. Oh, what you drinking?
No worries. By the time I've done this, I've had people to drink, vodka, wine, tea, water, you name it. It's been drunk here, but I've never had a guest to not drink anything. So this is the first. So that's pretty cool. I'm drinking a coffee. It's an aromatic coffee blend from Indonesia. It's probably the most famous brand they have in Indonesia, called Kapal Api, and it's probably the equivalent of what we would call of our Folgers in the United States. Okay. It's probably the most iconic. It has a good taste. It has a very good aroma to it. And so it's something I really enjoy, though I do drink my coffee for the most part straight black. Yeah, so
nice.
Now I know you're a game dev, so obviously anybody who's listening to this, they're going to say, "Oh, well, Jamil, he really must love playing games." So I have to ask, what have you been playing lately?
So this is a tough thing with game devs. I spend all my time making games and not enough time playing them. But I'll tell you two big things I've been playing. So one, there was a Warhammer game that got released called Chaos Gate. And it was like this intense strategy game. I don't know what it is that got me, but I played through the whole thing, easy difficulty. It's quite hard, and I played through it on easy, and I beat it, but I found it challenging. And the other one, we'll talk a little bit about the Atari VCS that I'm doing some dev for. So I got a dev kit for Atari VCS, and it has this Atari collection on it. So I've been playing Tempest, the arcade game Tempest, and yeah, never tried it before. I've seen lots of videos of it, and it's actually a blast. It's like super super old, like from the early 80s probably, or maybe late 70s, and it's super cool.
Yeah, that's a bit before my time, but
Same here.
my parents, they were teenagers in the 80s. So I was born in the late 80s. My parents were teenagers in the 80s. So they grew up going to arcades, playing Atari and stuff. And so I've seen it played before, but I've never actually played it myself. But
Yeah, that was the same here, but yeah, I finally got my hands on it, and I don't know, man, it's fun. There's something about it, like they put a lot of love and effort into it.
do you have a favorite game from that era?
So prior to getting this dev kit and all the games that were on it, I played around with Stella a little bit, and the one that really stuck out to me was Berserk.
Oh, Berserk. Oh, man. Berserk. Whew.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about that one, but it's fun. It's just like you run around, you shoot things, right? It's simple, it's good, it works, easy to understand. You just pick up and play. It's cool.
That game has some really interesting lore around it. Some really,
Oh,
really
it does, yeah.
which is really cool. It's well, I shouldn't say really
Can
cool
tell the story?
because it's I shouldn't really say it's cool because of what happens in the story, but it's interesting. So, are you familiar with the story?
I am, but you got to tell it because anyone listening's gonna want to know.
Okay. So, and correct me if I get anything wrong. So,
I'll do my best.
So there, I forget exactly where it happened at, but there was an arcade, and there was this kid there. It was a teenager. I want to say maybe 16, 17 years old. He was frantically trying to get the high score on this game. And if you've never played this game, it's kind of, I want to say it's maybe a bit similar to Smash TV, but maybe not quite so intense, perhaps. And so you have all these people coming at you, and you're trying to shoot them. And this kid was trying to get the high score, and he's been playing it for hours and hours. I want to say it was like 17, 18 hours in. And all of a sudden, the kid, he had a heart attack because of the stress, and he died because of that. And there's this one character that has this unsettling smile.
Yeah, Evil Otto.
Evil Otto. And this shit right here is like the fuel for creepypastas, okay? This forget Ben Drowned, forget, Lavender Town Syndrome. This right here is like the real deal. This right here is the real deal. But so, pretty cool, pretty interesting story. I mean, it's bad, the kid died, God rest his soul, but interesting, really, really interesting that something like that would happen. And some people believe that actually that may actually have fueled the whole, oh man, what's the name of the game?
Oh, Polybius.
Oh, yeah, that's it, Polybius. Some people believe that Polybius, part of the story or the mythology around Polybius was inspired by Berserk. Or at least part of what was going on with Berserk.
Could be, for sure. Yeah, because it's like, it's people playing games and getting sick, right? So that story you just told, that's someone playing a game and getting sick. It makes sense.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that era, though. It's so... Even though I didn't grow up in that era, a lot of the arcades I visited when I was a child was still heavily populated with games from that era. So if I had to choose, I would say either the original Donkey Kong, because that game has a special place in my heart, or there's this really cool game called Bosconian.
Okay.
Bosconian is kind of like this. The ship is the same, or it looks very similar to that in Galaxian, but you're flying around as opposed to having ships coming at you, and you have every stage has like maybe 3 or 4 or more space stations you have to destroy. And they're constantly shooting at you, and these enemy ships are coming at you, so you have to dodge. So it's not as straightforward as it sounds. But for the time, at least it feels, much more advanced than most of the other games that existed then.
Was that one you played it? Was it on the NES?
So when I want to say maybe I was in high school, my senior year in high school, or I'm sorry, my sophomore year in high school, my parents bought me, there was this little plug and play, arcade game. So it had Pac-Man, Dig Dug, Rally X, Galaxian, and Bosconian. I think that was it on it, and that's how I first came across it. And if you have a PlayStation, or if you have a means of playing a PlayStation, the first Namco Museum, if I'm not mistaken, has it on it as well.
Cool.
The last time you were here, you mentioned you were into MS-DOS gaming. So are you still
Oh
into
yeah.
it?
Well, I mean, I haven't. I should put DOSBox on and play around with some of those old games. That was like part of my growing up. All truth be told, and like I watch videos of people exploring that stuff, but I've never actually gone back and like gone way deep into it. I think I had DOSBox set up maybe like 5 or 10 years ago, but I've never gone back into it. But man, good idea. I should get some inspiration because it was unique. It was its own thing, right? Because like it was, I don't want to be an edge lord or anything, but it was like playing DOS on like a 286 or a 386. In my mind, it didn't feel as good as like NES or Super Nintendo, but it was more advanced than like an Atari 2600. So it was sort of this unique little niche that was it was kind of cool.
I want to say around maybe June 2022, I got hit with like a really horrible sinus infection. So I was like out of commission for about 2 or 3 weeks.
Wow.
Really like face swollen up. Just like horrible teeth aches, and
Oof.
just horrible. So I had a lot of downtime. So during that time, I stumbled across archive.org. Now, I've been using archive.org for many, many years, mostly for books. I'm an avid reader. But I realized there's an arcade on there. There's an arcade section. They have a huge section dedicated to, old computer games. It's essentially banditware at this point.
Gotcha.
And so I stumbled across some DOS games. And have you ever played Oregon Trail?
Oh, I've heard of it. No, I didn't have that one growing up, but I've seen lots of videos on it. Classic.
So sometimes when I was in elementary school, our teacher, if we had nothing else to do, they would let us go play Oregon Trail. And so we would break up in like the teams like four. And and I kid you not, fam, I spent like a week or two straight, like playing the hell out of that game, man. And it just experimenting with the different things you can do and stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting world. It's an interesting world. It's up there on my list of episodes of Freeloader Gaming I want to do. Like I want to do a series, or not a series, but an episode of that series on DOS games or abandonedware on archive.org. It's fun.
Gotcha.
If you're looking to get back into it, man, I would highly recommend checking out archive.org on that.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of them, like, and these weird little things from growing up where you kind of like miss it and you don't even realize you do, and then you see something. Yeah, it's
Bro,
I should go check that out.
Bro, I am a huge Sonic fan. Like the original Sonic games for Mega Drive or Genesis, depending on where you're at in the world, the Game Gear. I was a huge fan of those. But I had no idea that there was a Sonic the Hedgehog 2 arcade game until I found it on archive.org. And
Oh wow.
yeah, so really, really interesting. Really, really, you can find a lot of gems, a lot of games you've probably never heard of, and maybe even some interesting versions of games that you are familiar with as well.
Cool.
No.
Yeah, that's wild.
So I'd highly recommend. And there are a lot of free resources out there like that, man. There are a lot of free resources out there like that that are working to try to preserve games. So, and I think that's really cool because otherwise, if not for, preserving these games, they would be lost to time.
Oh,
And
exactly. Because a bunch of them, there's some rare arcade cabinet, right? Like, they end up in a landfill and then it's just gone.
I can't even imagine how much media we lost because of that, man. And before the age of the internet, preserving stuff online, dumping ROMs, dumping arcade cabinets and such. Ooh,
Yeah,
man.
for sure.
Now, besides gaming, what else are you into?
things that I'm into, I spend a ton of time cooking, cleaning, like going to the gym quite a bit, and working on game dev as much as I can. Plus, having a job keeps me busy for sure. So yeah, I've been trying to get into a little bit of meditation before bed. I have a little bit of trouble sleeping, so I'm trying to, find new ways to unwind and whatnot before I go to sleep. And yeah, I was kind of like before that, when I was a bit younger, I was really into music and spent a lot of time in school too, going to like university and then night school at a technical college and then more university and just like on and on. But the school thing, my drive to go to school has diminished slightly, but it's still kind of there. I think about it from time to time. How about you, man? What do you do outside of podcasting?
Oh, wow, man. Let's see. Well, I like traveling. I do love to travel. I don't get a chance to do that so much anymore because I have a 6 year old now, so I don't get a chance to do that so much, but it is something I do enjoy. I like meeting people. I love talking to people. I love having conversations, which is why I love doing Coffee with Big Mike so much. I love exchanging ideas. I love getting different points of view. I love that so much as well. I like photography. I like reading. I like writing as well. I do like working out too,
Right.
and I pretty much love anything that lets me be creative. Also,
Yeah.
whenever I get some downtime, I like watching, I like keeping up with the latest episodes of my favorite cartoon shows like Family Guy, South Park, Beavis and Butthead. Also, I like watching anime as well, and
Nice.
also playing games. I love games. I'm a huge fan of, especially, not just indie games, but also retro games as well. So it's
Yeah.
something I do enjoy. However, in the past, I haven't really been able to play so much, but it varies from time to time or season to season. So I'm now getting more into my season of the year or my time of the year where I can play much more than when I can in the past or in the previous part of the year.
Yeah,
So,
that's awesome. Yeah, I hear that too, man. Like it's just sometimes things are just too crazy. It's too busy. Can't make time for it. But yeah, it's definitely nice to just chill out with a video game or watch some TV or whatever.
what kind of meditation are you into?
Oh, I got no idea, man. I sometimes I try and think about nothing, and sometimes I just try and breathe, and that's about as far as I've gotten. Should probably take a class or something, figure out how to actually do that properly. But the just disconnecting from electronics and even just thinking a little bit, I find helpful. So it's better than nothing. Is how I'm feeling. But yeah, go get some coaching at some point.
Yeah, I was very much into meditation when I was a teenager. Very, very much into it. So there are a lot of different styles you could look into. The most simplest one though is just kind of focusing on your breath. You breathe in, I'm breathing in. You breathe out, I'm breathing out. And you'd be surprised at how simple that is, but how effective it can be to kind of calm you down, to kind of center you and such. But man, let me tell you
Yeah.
what, sleeping problems. Ooh, man, insomnia is a bitch to have, man. Insomnia is it's not something I struggle with on a regular basis, but I do have like phases in my life where I will go like 3 or 4 days in a row and can't sleep good at all. And
Mm.
so I try different things. I try listening to ASMR, and that's helped me a lot. So
Oh,
not like the random noise like ASMR, not like the or I'm going to open this pack of noodles now. Listen to me. No, not like that. But more like an ASMR story time. Like I'm a huge fan of Kitty Minks, like her work, like who I was really fortunate to interview here. So her work, really, really helped me out when I was struggling with insomnia as well.
nice. Yeah, I'll check that out.
And what kind of music are you into?
So when I was in like high school and whatnot, I did like I was big into like rap rock and I guess you'd call it like new wave kind of stuff, Tool and
Like
Horn and
new
all of
metal.
that. Yeah, that's the one, new metal. Yeah. And had a bit of a classical phase. Like tried getting into that, and it's not bad. It's not bad. And then lately, I listen to like synthwave, like cyberpunk type of music, and bits of retro stuff here and there.
I kind of went for a phase too. I was in high school, so when I was in high school, I was mostly a rock guy, like pretty much all genre, like punk, metal, alternative, especially '90s alternative. But
Yeah.
I went through this phase when I was like in maybe junior or senior, when I was in my junior or senior year, where I started listening to jazz and fusion. And yeah, it's pretty cool. I liked it, and then I discovered ska punk. Like,
Yeah.
so I found a couple of bands. Like I found, like, I played Tony Hawk's Pro Skater,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then I heard Superman by Goldfinger, and then I there was a famous American TV show called Malcolm in the Middle, and
Oh, yeah.
the theme song by They Might Be Giants, You're Not the Boss of Me.
Yeah.
And then sometimes my radio station, my local rock station, would play one song by the Mighty Mighty Bosstones, The Impression That I Get. And I was like, damn, they all sound kind of, these songs kind of have a similar sound to it. No, that's something, I like that sound, but yeah, it's pretty cool. And then it wasn't until I got into university, I was like, oh, what's this? Oh, they're all the same genre. What's this magical genre? Oh, it's ska punk. And then that's how Big Mikey became a rude boy.
Yeah, ska's fun.
I love the energy with it, man. Like whenever I need to pick me up, I make my coffee, I put on my ska punk, and I am ready, fam. So whenever, if you ever, just an FYI, anybody who's listening, if you follow me on Twitter and you see me go in a shit post, like a binge of shit posts, it's usually because I've been drinking too much coffee and I've been listening to too much ska punk, and my energy is just off the Richter.
Awesome.
Sometimes I don't want to say I get depression, but sometimes, it's like, sometimes, when I don't feel like I sleep well, I'll be in like a mentally not good state. Like I'll feel down.
Yeah.
So I don't really want to call
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
depression, because there are people out there who actually struggle with depression,
Yeah.
but that's kind of my life hack to get myself out of that.
Gotcha.
It's hard to be depressed, or hard to have that feeling of sadness when when you can't sit still. Um,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Now, to kind of shift gears a bit, to kind of start shifting into talking more about dev or game dev.
Yeah, for sure.
No, as a gamer, it can be very obvious that gaming influences your work as a game dev. But what about your other hobbies? Do you think your other hobbies or interests have an influence on your dev work?
I do, because like I mentioned I was into playing music, and like I bought a book on sound design and I've been reading that, and like kind of like, oh, that's kind of cool. Be neat to, make my own audio clips, and I played around a little bit with Cakewalk, which can be used to put together audio clips, and I got like a VST for a speech synthesizer, so I've been making robot voices and stuff like that. So I think, going from music to sound design, it's a big leap, but there's something there. And in terms of like graphics, I had a rough transition there, but like when I was doing, I worked in kind of drafting engineering for a little bit, so I learned like AutoCAD, which you can make 3D models with, and you can make blueprints and stuff like that. So to go from that to Blender, which is used for making video game 3D models, is a big jump. You'd think it's like a 3D model is a 3D model, but you have to make them in different ways, and it's a pretty different process. But I think because I was so good with AutoCAD, I had kind of like a confidence and a foundation. So even though I had to make a big change to do things in Blender, there was still something there, and there's some little bit of knowledge at least that kind of transferred over. So those things definitely influenced. And like, I mean, my hobby as a gamer, obviously as a kid I played tons of games, so that definitely transfers over, and serves for my inspiration in terms of picking graphical styles and picking musical styles and things like that for the game.
So I have to ask, because I was a huge fan of Superstar Shooter 16, and my favorite aspect of that, or one of my favorite aspects, was the
Mm.
boss just taunting you as you're playing. And I have to ask, is that how you created that voice of the boss?
Sort of. So the idea behind that boss taunting came from my sound guy, but I elaborated on it quite a bit and made it my own. So he recorded those clips using Sam, which is the software automatic mouth, I think, which is from Commodore 64. It was big on that system. So he recorded those. I commissioned him to do that. And now I've downloaded a program called Chip Speech from Plogue software. So and that's like a VST that plugs into Cakewalk, and then you can control it using a MIDI device. I could actually reproduce those clips on my own, which I might end up doing if I decide to extend things out and just have more clips there, more taunts and things like that. But yeah, that's the origin story behind that, and it's kind of like it's so weird studying game design and coming up with ideas and whatnot because like I've read two books on game design now, and it's like everything that's in there you already know it. Like if you're a gamer, you know you'll read a chapter on enemy attack patterns and you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, I remember that enemy attack pattern from Super Mario Brothers, and I remember that one from Gradius, and that this one from whatever else, right? Like, or this one came from Contra, and like you've seen all of it before, but it's still like for me when I'm nose deep in code and all my brain is thinking about is like trying to optimize things so it'll run on Xbox One. I'm not really having all of those great ideas or things like that. So it's nice to get input from other people, and it's yeah, I don't know exactly where all of the ideas came from. A lot of them were mine, obviously, but and a lot of times too is iteration is super important, right? Because my sound guy said, "Hey, have a retro voice in the game," and I was like, "Cool, okay." But then I did what he said because it was a cool idea. But then it was like, okay, well, I want glowing bars that glow when the guy talks, right? Because that's, if they're red glowing bars, it's kind of spooky. And I want a whole bunch of enemies to pop in when he taunts you, because that's even scarier, right? That's gonna get people even more pumped up about the game, so or about that experience, anyways, that aspect of it. So yeah, it's I don't know, it's just a lot of fun. That's what I find.
Bro, one of the things I really hit me with that game is just the amount of detail that really went into that. Like, I remember the first time I noticed, because, it's kind of an intense game, so, or it can be an intense game depending on how, the cards fall. Because every time you
Yeah.
play it, it's kind of a different experience. I remember the first time I noticed that, the sound and the movement of the enemies and the stages were synced up. I was like, holy shit, that's phenomenal. That right there is phenomenal. And
Yeah.
it has like almost a mesmerizing effect to it too.
For sure. So I mean, we were talking about Polybius earlier. I was kind of inspired by that, and the other thing was sort of like I get these weird ideas in my head. Like I studied biology, right? In university at one point, I had to take a couple courses like that. So I thought like be cool to make software that's like a living thing, right? So if you sync the music to the visuals, that's almost like maybe like the game having a heartbeat, and like if you have this talking robot, maybe that's like the game having a voice like a person would have, and just kind of these crazy ideas. So yeah, that's eh, it's fun stuff to think about. Doesn't some of these ideas, things don't always work out, but when it works well, it's kind of cool to see it all come to life.
I appreciate, game devs, content creators, YouTubers, VTubers taking risk and trying new things. And so even if they don't work out, I can appreciate the fact that they tried, man. And that's honestly one thing I can honestly say about your work, Jamil. And I can honestly say that your work has come a long way. I remember, okay, so just kind of backtrack. So we had Jamil on roughly a year ago, give or take a month or two. And I'm sorry, 2 years ago, give or take a month or two. And, I made my episode of Big Mike Indie Game Showcase on Superstar Shooter 16 shortly before that. And in doing research for that, I came across some really old screenshots of Superstar Shooter 16 and just look completely different. Like I didn't recognize it almost. So I can definitely tell you're somebody who likes to try new things and you always like to improve, on what you're
Oh
doing.
yeah.
Always. And that's something I really respect.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, and it's, learning game dev for me anyways, it's been a long journey. Like I went to school for computer science, but I didn't go for game dev specifically. So like, yeah, I'm pretty strong on the coding aspect of things, but when it comes to lighting and shaders and animating things and all of that, it's kind of, I'm learning it just like anybody else would, right? So, and it's kind of the, crazy intersection that a person like you, where, your background's in film, you would know those things like lighting and sound design and a lot of that. You would have learned that in movies. So it's interesting that like some universities and whatnot, the game dev school will be as part of the school of film as opposed to like the comp sci program where you'd expect it. So it's interesting, but it makes sense in a lot of ways too. So yeah, it's like no matter what you're doing, if you're an artist or if you're coming out of film and you want to be a, game director, or if you're a sound person or a programmer or whatever, you have to learn all the other areas, and it takes time. And like, I was never super artistically inclined, so when I get a good artistic idea, I try and run with it, because a lot of, getting your game to get attention for your game requires things to look really nice. So, yeah, the visuals are so important.
Yeah, I believe that's the case as well. And unfortunately, I believe sometimes there are a lot of games that don't get the love that they deserve, just simply because they don't have, the cutting edge visuals. And
Hmm.
so, unfortunately, that tends to be the case. Like, for example, you'll see that there'll be like an amazing game, like in the indie dev community, you can find some amazing arcade era, 80s arcade era esque graphics that come from really amazing games, really phenomenal games. But unfortunately, because of those graphics, a lot of people will kind of scoff at them or kind of overlook them, and they don't get the love they deserve. For I do believe that unfortunately people will look at a game, or the first thing that catches people's attention is the graphics of a game, and understandably, it is a visual medium. So
Hmm.
understandably, I don't fault people for that initially, but I do think that old adage, you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, is very much true in this case. But
Yeah, because I mean, there's so many aspects to a game that you can't see, right? Like, is it well balanced? Does it feel nice to play, right? Does the character move nicely, when you're controlling it, right? Things like that. Like, does it feel like you're inside of the game? All of those things, which are not entirely visually related, although the visuals help with all of that too. But yeah.
I came across Superstar Shooter 16 about 2 years ago, and you've been working on it for some time before then. About
Yep.
how long have you been working on Superstar Shooter 16?
We're getting, oh, sorry. No, I think we're past 3 years at this point. So probably 3 years, 2 months, something like that.
And what's new in the world of Superstar Shooter 16?
Okay, so big things that have been happening are not incredibly exciting for the gamer, unfortunately, but exciting for me. So I've done a ton of optimization. So my game now, sorry, Superstar Shooter 16 now runs on Xbox One. So that's like the 2014 model of Xbox One. Um, I've done a ton of refactoring, which is basically just means like, you write your code and it works, but then you want to rewrite your code in such a way that it's easy to maintain, right? That it's easy to read. It's like reading a story almost or something. Like just everything flows in the most logical way and it's easy to understand. Which, like you said, for archiving, right? So if the code is left in a good state when I walk away from this project, then it'll be easier for me to open it up 5 or 10 years from now if I were to choose to do that type of thing. So there's been a lot of code refactoring, a lot of performance improvements to get the game working on some of these kind of, hate to say it, but lower power consoles like the Xbox One, which is quite old at this point in time. And yeah, along with the performance, so I had to change a lot of the visuals in order to make the game run on Xbox One. I think for the most part they've been improvements, but there are also things that reduce the polygon count. So things, like a circle, or sorry, like a torus, for example, has a ton of polygons on it. A sphere has a ton of polygons, but if you change a sphere to an icosahedron, sorry, which is like a 12-sided geometric shape, then there's far fewer polygons, and that allows things to run better. I am getting the game ready for a launch on the Atari VCS, and I'm also kind of trying to get the game to a point where I feel comfortable closing it out and saying, like, this is good, this is finalized. So I've been working on the difficulty curve a lot. I've made variants of all of the enemies. So there's like an easy batch of enemies, a medium difficulty batch of enemies, and a hard difficulty batch of enemies. So I think that kind of thing helps with the difficulty curve. And yeah, beyond that, there's been little tweaks here and there. The one thing, there's like an evil AI in the game that you were mentioning, this guy that kind of taunts you and does stuff like that. I'm also trying to kind of build up a good one. So there's a kind of a lady AI who will warn you if you're about to hit something, or she'll warn you if your health is low, or she'll say, hey, good, you picked up a health power up, things like that. So that gives a little bit more of another dimension to the game.
It's just pretty damn amazing just to see how far it's evolved, and it's still evolving, man.
I know. Well, that's the thing for me is like it's cozy, it's fun to work on, right? I've made the code nice, but there's a part of me that's like, I can't just make one game, right? So there's a big drive to move on, but it is also comfortable and fun to work on.
Now, I want to ask one final question on this subject, and then we will move on.
Sure.
But what do you think is your final vision for Superstar Shooter 16?
Oh, wow. Okay, so there's two grand finale pieces for me. So one is to put a final boss into the game. I know I've suggested this to people and like in the Atari community, and they said, oh well, you should put like 4 final bosses in, and I'm kind of like, I do want to move on, so I'll probably do a final boss. The other big visionary piece I have is to get the game running on VR, which is probably going to be a really big lift, but I think it could be super cool. So I played Jeff Minter's the guy who made Polybius, and he's made a few other like really retro games, but he put them into VR, and it's a cool effect that comes out of it. It works really well.
I do think, I'll be honest with you, I've never tried VR. I've never used it before.
Oh.
So, but I will say, I feel like that would be a very trippy, VR experience. Like, I would be down for that. Like, I would be down for that, man. Let me tell you what, I would be willing to lose my VR virginity to that game. So, let's just say that.
Yeah, I do plenty of VR. It's fun, man. Games like Beat Saber and the old Polybius and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a good time. And it's like anything, it's in moderation. But yeah, if you ever get a chance to go to a VR arcade or something, it's worth checking out. It's cool.
No, me and Jamil, we talk a lot. We talk a lot. outside of Coffee with Big Mike, and
Yeah.
and so you mentioned that you want to move on, to your
Yeah.
next project, and so what has it been like trying to move on to your next project?
So I think I'm ready emotionally. We'll say that. I like it's been the last year or so I've wanted to, but it's also like I have these clear goals. Like, I'm doing a launch on the Atari VCS. That's their new console that came out a couple of years ago. So I got to get my store page set up for them, and there's a whole bunch of customization specific to that community that they've asked for, and just kind of getting things in a place where I'm confident most people will enjoy it in that community. So yeah, so I mean, it might be like no, I shouldn't say that. I guess it's I'm mostly just eager. I'm also a little scared that I won't have enough time to really sink into the next project because like with Superstar Shooter 16, I started it during COVID, right? So I had nothing going on in my life. Like, I couldn't even go see my parents because we were in lockdown. Had a pod mate for a little bit, but it didn't really work out. And I programmed, man. That's all I did for like 4 or 6 months. And then after that, I was finishing up my comp sci degree during COVID, during lockdown, during all of that. So I was still putting a ton of time into Superstar Shooter 16 while I was finishing up like the three courses that I had left in my comp sci degree. So with starting a project on weekends only, it scares me a little bit, but the next project I'm going to probably reuse a lot of scripts and elements from Superstar Shooter 16, and I've learned so much that I think I'll be able to just do things a lot more efficiently. Like, because with Superstar Shooter 16, like it's essentially the only project I've worked on. I've done one or two little things where I was doing little experiments and stuff with one of my buddies, but like the bulk of my effort has gone into it. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting, and I mean I'm only gonna find out what my reaction to this big change is gonna be once it actually happens, but I'm also excited about it. I've there's a YouTuber I follow somewhat closely. He's a game dev, but he comes more from the art side, and his name is actually he comes from the art, marketing, and business side. His name is Thomas Brush, and his content's actually gotten a lot better. It started out it was really dramatic, but he's a lot more fun to watch now, I find. And his whole thing is like you're gonna fail at your first three games anyways, right? So if I keep working at Superstar Shooter 16 and trying to promote it and polish it, I mean it might go somewhere someday, but I'm also of the mindset like bang a couple games out. That way I have a portfolio. And I mean I believe in quality. I'm never gonna make anything that's bad, but I definitely want to get to the point where I have, JD Video Game Productions has 3 or 4 games under its belt. It'll help me look a little more professional and accomplished. All the cards on the table there for you.
I do gotta say that is some really good advice. That is some really good advice, and I say it goes far beyond this game dev. You're talking about filmmaking. Your first couple of films are probably gonna be cringeworthy. Your first couple of YouTube videos are gonna be cringeworthy. I'm speaking from experience. And maybe you could say, well, Michael, you never really got out of that subject. You never really got out of that phase. And I'm like, okay, well, fuck you. But yeah, you're right. But that's just kind of part of it. Also, with other things, your first time often isn't as good or as magical as you'd expect it to be, but it's a learning process, man. And that if I'm convinced, I'm not claiming I'm wise or I have some great knowledge or I'm a great artist or what have you. But if there's anything I've realized is that life, if nothing else, is a learning experience. So you learn, you gain knowledge, oftentimes by trial and error, and you use it to build yourself up to move on to other things. And it sounds to me like game dev is very much like that as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure.
No.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean that's just it. And like, a grievance I have with Superstar Shooter 16 is like I'm still cleaning up my old mistakes from 3 years ago, right? When I was first starting out and I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, most of them have been refactored and fixed up, but there's the odd time where like I stumble across some script and it's like, whoa, I wrote that like 2.5 years ago, and like, whoa, this is really bad. I gotta fix this. But instead of, making forward progress or anything, right? I'm just fixing old stuff from back when I didn't know what I was doing. So, yeah.
Bro, sometimes I'll go back and I'll look at, screenplays I wrote back when I was in high school or, middle school, and I will just cringe like, dude, why, Michael? Why? Why? Uh, but it's just a part of growing up, man. It's a part of growing up. It's a part of maturing. Not just mentally, but also in whatever field you're working in as well. And speaking of wisdom and advice, what advice can you give to anyone who's struggling to move on from their last project once it's finished to the next one?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Oh, okay, so yeah, I mean, I have been through things where, sometimes you lose something, right? Like I had to take a break from university, right? And my thing was, I loved being in school, so I took a break from university and I was kind of devastated and I didn't know what to do. But I went and like I played in a band with my brother and I got a job instead of going to school for a while, right? And that kept me busy and happy. So if you can find something to replace the thing that you're losing, the thing you're letting go of, that will help. And then there's also, if you're having those kinds of feelings, and like even for me with this is the most time I've spent on a project. I don't know how I'm gonna feel or how I'm gonna react when I finally have that like week of, I didn't touch Superstar Shooter 16, or that month or that half year of like I haven't touched this. I don't really know how I'm gonna feel. I suspect I'll be okay. But yeah, I think just having the next thing queued up is important. Which for me, I mean, I've sort of started making plans for my next game, but they're nothing's set in stone. But yeah, that's the best advice I have. But I don't not coming from a professional.
Now, speaking of your next project, can you tell us about your next project?
Yeah, man. I brought the notes with me. It'd be good for a chuckle. I've been coming up with things before falling asleep here. So okay, so I'm calling it for now Berserkertronic 9000 AD. It's going to be a twin stick shooter. Came up with some ideas for the storyboards for the first scene. So these are going to be cringeworthy, but we'll cringe together, bud. So here's version 1. In the year 9000 AD, only one thing stands in the way of freedom for humanity. Berserkertronic 9000 AD.
Dun
Okay,
dun dun dun.
it's like barely coherent, which it's going to be about the game, not the story. Let's try story number 2. All right, this will give you more ideas of what this is about. In the year 9000 AD, everything is made out of lasers except for one thing. Berserkertronic 9000 AD. Yeah, that one made a little less sense. So yeah, it'll be a whole bunch of lasers and laser weapons, simple graphics. I don't know how to use Unity's animation system, so I'm going to learn how to have more humanoid type characters. It's going to be a similar aesthetic to Superstar Shooter 16. It'll be kind of that cyber world type of thing. Definitely want to do audio visualization again. One of my big dreams as a game dev is to build an RPG eventually. Like maybe it'll be turn-based or strategy-based, something like that. This game's not going to be an RPG because I've heard they're quite hard to build, and it's like it's a massive commitment. But I think I'm gonna have a simple inventory system so you can like swap out weapons and armor and things like that. And yeah, animated and colored text, things like that. We're gonna have speech synthesizers, same as Superstar Shooter 16. Enemy AIs are going to be a little more sophisticated. I've had people request a two-player mode with Superstar Shooter 16. I can't do that, but it's just too big of a change. But for the next game, I think I'm gonna plan local two-player mode in from the start. And yeah, those are the big goals. It's gonna be twin stick shooter type thing.
So now, for our audience listening, could you explain a bit about what a twin stick shooter is?
Yeah, so typically you've got kind of a top-down view, right? So you're looking at the player's like head and their body, and you'd imagine you're holding your Xbox One controller, your Xbox controller, or your PlayStation controller. So one of your thumbsticks is gonna shoot in whatever direction you're pushing the thumbstick. That'll be your right thumbstick typically. And then with your left thumbstick, you're running your character around. And then it might be something like one of the trigger buttons will let you throw a grenade or something like that. But the grenade's going to fly in the direction that you're pointing with your right thumbstick. Classic example of this game I played a lot through the pandemic with my buddies. And, thank you so much for them. Oh man, it's a really good game too. I haven't played it in a long time. Helldivers, man. That's the one.
Would you consider this game a on-rail shooter too, or do you think it's going to take a different approach?
I mean, there's things so I'm playing in my head, I'm playing with the idea of sort of forcing the player to navigate through rooms or to navigate through kind of some kind of cyber world landscape type of thing. So I could imagine like, the right side of the screen is disintegrating and it's forcing you to the left, or it'd probably be more intuitive and comfortable for people if it's like the left side of the screen is disintegrating, you have to be moving to the right at all times type of thing. That would be a cool thing. And yeah, I'm playing with that idea. It won't be like Star Fox though or anything like that. Yeah, it's more of a top-down view type of thing. I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, like Berserk. Oh, you just mentioned the game there. Yeah, that's kind of similar to what twin stick shooter is kind of like, or Robotron 2084. That's another one, very famous twin stick shooter.
And what stage of development would you say it's in?
Concept. Yeah, it's at the concept phase. It's on 4 sheets of paper in my in my binder. Yeah, I'm still pretty focused on Superstar Shooter 16. I get these odd ideas and I scribble them down, and even the things with like the storyboard. I was going for kind of a goofy thing there, but we'll see how that evolves over time.
Now, just to kind of get an idea, from the very first time you conceptualized Superstar Shooter 16, about how long after that point was it that you made your first demo?
Oh, so I would say 3 months. I remember, I want to say it was the summer of 2020. We got a little reprieve from COVID. Like our numbers were low. So I was we were kind of allowed out, and I went and hung out with my buddies, and I showed the game to them and their girlfriends and whatnot. And yeah, I got it done in like 3 months, but I'm an extreme case in a lot of ways because like I didn't know what I was doing, which worked against me in a pretty strong way. And I also had a ton of time on my hands because of COVID, which worked in my favor in a pretty large way. So yeah, that was 3 months. I'm guessing I'd be able to get a prototype up and running quite a bit quicker this time around, but it's also like I'm only doing this stuff on weekends, so we'll see. I'm hoping like once I start working at it, 2, 3 months, I'll have something that I could show to the world. Send you a build or something.
Oh, I would love to try it, man. I would absolutely love to give it a shot. Yeah, I'm always looking for stuff to play. I really, really am. I'm always looking
Yeah.
for stuff to play on the weekends and such. And that's one of the really
Yeah.
cool things I like about doing all these Wishlist Wednesday and Screenshot Saturday and Trailer Tuesday posts is I get to come across so many games, so many unique and cool games. And
Hmm.
so most of the games I find, either a game or most of the games I tend to play, and or I'm talking about playing in my weekly post, or this is what I'm playing this weekend, usually come
Yeah.
from either game devs sending me stuff or coming across games in those posts. So I'm always looking for stuff to play. So whenever you get it done, please send it to me, man. I would love to
Oh,
feature
heck
it
yeah.
on my new series. So I have a new series out now. Well, it's not.
Cool.
Well, by the time this comes out, it'll be like 2-3 months old at this point. But my series, Big Mike's Indie Game Watch, is kind of a new series or a series I didn't do the first time you were on. So this series is focusing on games that are in pre-development at various stages. Some games have demos out, some
Oh,
don't. And so I like to take a look at them, what info is available, if there's a demo available, talk about it, read the Steam page, give my thoughts on the situation. And so that's just kind of what I like to do. So I would love to feature your demo on there, if it, when it comes out, if I can play it, if
yeah,
I can
man.
play it.
Yeah, I'm all over that, man. That's an awesome opportunity for me. So yeah. Yeah, it'll be a while, unfortunately, because I gotta wrap things up with Superstar Shooter 16 and gotta wrap it up right. But yeah, that's a good thing because it's something for me to look forward to doing once I transition to the new project. So gives me a little goal, a target to work towards.
So now I want to shift gears and talk more about game dev in general. So
Yeah.
what keeps you coming back to game dev?
Yeah, so I have thought about this and I think I know the answer for me. The answer for me is I'm kind of a open-minded person and I tend to need a lot of variety in my life is kind of the only way to put it. So, I've had jobs where, I worked on an assembly line or something like that and it drove me crazy, obviously, because it's just boring, right? Like the people around you are the only fun thing that's going on. You just keep doing the same thing over and over again at work. So yeah, I tend to need a lot of variety in terms of what I'm doing, and game dev delivers on that hard, especially if you're an indie game dev, because you gotta know programming, you gotta have some kind of visual sense, you have to have some kind of a 3D spatial sense, you have to have a, UI, UX sense of some kind, or to at least be thinking about that, the user experience and making nice menus for the user to navigate through that are intuitive. You have to think about sound design, and ideally in a big way. You have to think about your musical selection, and that has to match up to the game to make it all feel good, right? And big thing I've been reading about is game feel, which is go on. They have all these technical terms out of psychology, it's proprioception and things like that, and it's just making the player feel like they're in the game as much as possible. And then you get into like technical game design stuff, like balancing out difficulty throughout the game and things like that. And it's just it's a ton of fun. It's challenging, it's stimulating. I'm still, as I mentioned, like I still haven't even scratched the surface in a lot of ways. Like I don't even know how to animate things. Like there's, 3D characters that are rigged and things like that. I don't know how to do any of that. I did all of my animations, all the things that you see moving around on the screen in Superstar Shooter 16. It's just math. It's just math and logic. There's no true like animation there. So yeah, and like to the AI that's running in Superstar Shooter 16, like if you have like an enemy flying towards you or something like that, it's basically just a physics calculation. It's not really thinking or making decisions or anything like that. Like the enemies either just fly towards you or they kind of stay in one spot. But there's ways to make even simple stuff like that interesting. So yeah, it's good because there's a lot of variety. That's why I like it.
So it sounds to me like being a game dev, you have to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah, for sure. For sure, man. And I loved games when I was a kid too, right? That that ties into it as well. If I was like someone who only cared about money, I would probably still be doing engineering, or I'd go into AI or web design or something like that, right? There's easier ways to make money that are less competitive and all the rest of it. So yeah, you have to love it, and you have to be willing to learn a ton of things.
You know what's interesting? Because I would describe content creation in a very similar manner. A very, very similar manner. If you want to get into content creation, you have to want to do it. You have to have a love for it. It's not something you're going to want to do to try to get rich, because you're not going to get rich. At least the vast majority of people who do this aren't going to get rich, and they're damn sure aren't going to get rich overnight. And
Oh, exactly.
and you have to be a jack of all trades as well. Production, editing, marketing,
Yep.
networking. There's so much you have to do, man. So much you have to do. I'm just kind of astounded just how similar it is, how similar all these
Yep.
different things are.
Yeah.
Filmmaking, game dev, content creation, all these things, they kind of, even though they're different, they're from very different mediums. There's a lot of overlap between them and how they function.
Well, I was mentioning to you, I was looking for graduate programs in game design, and it's like, yeah, man, you go to the School of Film to learn game dev, which at some universities, which is crazy, but it does make sense once you start getting into it, because yeah, like sound and light and animation and all these things, it's all film stuff. So just a ton of crossover.
That actually surprised me. That actually surprised me when you told me that. But after I reflect on it a bit, it does make a lot of sense. There's a lot of crossover there. There's
Yeah.
a great deal of crossover.
And I mean, what I mentioned it's not like a universal or anything, but I know like one of the big university I was looking at in Canada is definitely you go through the film school to go into game dev, but some of them are, yeah, it's game dev as a comp sci minor or something like that. But yeah, it's definitely important to have that artistic, creative kind of direction for things, and all those technical aspects like sound and lighting I mean, games have cameras in them too, even, right? So even how you position your camera and all of that. I'm just going by gut feel, but I'm sure there's a whole theory of how you compose a scene in a film and all of that transfer over to a game really nicely.
There is so much you can do with the cinematography. There's so much you can do to tell a story just with the camera angles and the style of camera that's being used. And if you're really interested in this, if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. Like,
Oh yeah.
the best cinematography I've seen has come from those series, man. And just how the colors, the camera, the lenses, the type of film being used, man, it adds so much adds so many layers to the storytelling. I would definitely start there if you're interested in digging deeper into that.
Yeah, well, and it's wild too, right? Because it's, that you say that to me, I have to, when I watch those, I got to like pay attention to what's going on, right? Because if you're just looking at it and you're not thinking about the camera angle or things like that, then you don't really pick up on the tricks. You just know it's super good, right?
And with a show like that, or with those two series in particular, not even just to study it from a film point of view, but man, just to kind of pay attention. There are so many subtle points to that story, or those stories that are being told by Vince Gilligan. There are so many subtle points that you can pick up, just by, looking at or paying attention to the camera angles, the type of, film being used. For example, I don't want to spoil it for you, but have you finished Better Call Saul?
No, I haven't watched much of that. I've seen an episode or two of Breaking Bad, and like it's cool, but yeah,
So
haven't seen much.
I won't spoil it for you, Dan. I won't spoil it for you. So now, where do you see JD Video Game Productions in 10 years?
Wow. Well, I would for sure hope to have more than a few games under my belt. I would love it if I had an artist on my team. I obviously can't afford anything other than a contractor at this point in time. but like having a full-time artist and a full-time marketing person working with me would be just phenomenal. That would be the bee's knees. That would make my life a lot easier and nicer, and it would result in a much higher quality product.
Could you see yourself working as a full-time game dev at some point in your life?
I think so. I think so. I mean, this is there's always silver linings with things. Like silver lining with the pandemic is I got to be a full-time indie game dev for about 4 months, and then yeah, I was probably a full-time indie game dev for longer than that actually, because while I was in school, I was still putting a ton of hours into it. So, I mean, I did that and I was pretty happy. I was enjoying myself. I was learning a lot. I didn't mind, having to figure things out on my own because that's kind of the one big change with like being your own boss and managing yourself. So you have to figure out what to do with yourself. But I think I did okay with that. So I make little plans and then I follow through on them, similar to kind of what happens at work usually. So, yeah, I think I could imagine things growing, but it's also, sort of whatever happens, happens. But yeah, I definitely I enjoy it a lot, and for now I'm gonna keep going at it on weekends, and I definitely love and cherish my full-time job and I enjoy that and I definitely need to keep doing the full-time job that I have because this stuff won't pay the bills, but it's a ton of fun. So I'll be keeping at it.
Now, the last specific question I have for you: do you have any advice for any game developers out there?
Oh yeah, big time. Big time. So if someone is like 16 or 17 or something and they have no money, just go watch YouTube videos and make cool stuff, and hopefully someone will notice, or you'll be able to, go to college or university and study game dev, and you'll learn a lot. You'll pick up on a lot of things. If someone's older like me, one of the biggest things is to leverage other people's work. So like Unity, for example, that's the game engine I use. Unity has an asset store, and you can go on that asset store, you can buy sound effects. You can buy more sophisticated packages for managing your game's controllers. I mean, I bought one last week to give me animated text so that, I can have letters bouncing around on the screen, and I don't have to go through programming all of that. I just install this package and configure my text to pull from that package, and then I have, now I have some little bits of animated text that I'm going to add into a few specific spots. But yeah, you can save yourself a ton of time. So if someone has a bit of money saved up and they're going into game dev, just be ready to drop like $1,000 or $2,000 buying packages, because you're gonna save so much time. And yeah, I think the other thing is don't make the mistake I made. Have a couple projects you're not super attached to and that you can throw away, because like something that's been time consuming for me is like I've refactored so much stuff on Superstar Shooter 16 where it's like I could have had Superstar Shooter 16 be a kind of okay, mediocre type of thing, and I'd probably already have a pretty cool second game built up just because, I spent all this time rewriting code and trying to make things run more smoothly or just have things better organized. So, yeah, those are two really big pieces of advice. Use the Unity Asset Store. Even if you're, like me, you're not visually, artistically inclined. There's sites like Turbo Squid, things like that, where you can get 3D models. So there's a ton of resources available. And I mean, the crazy thing, if you don't have a ton of money, if you're that 15 or 16-year-old kid or whatever, still go on the Unity Asset Store, because they give away assets for free sometimes. Some people publish free assets. Sometimes there's like hey, it's July 10th. That's the day we're recording this. There's some asset that's available for free because it's July 10th or whatever, or it's the Thanksgiving free asset or whatever, right? They come up with reasons to give stuff away for free. So that's a big piece of advice. A thing I've noticed other people do is they'll buy like humble bundles full of assets. Yeah, just do the best you can to leverage the work of other people because it's such a colossal endeavor to make a game that you don't want to get hung up on some weird thing like, like I mentioned a minute ago, like building your own system to make animated text or something when you can go drop $50 and then you have a package that just does it for you. So yeah, there's two big pieces of advice.
I just want to add, man. I just want to add there because I've never published a game, but I have worked with some minor game development myself, and so
hmm
I kind of drew on a lot of the principles I learned from filmmaking, especially in the budget aspect. I come from a
hmm
low and no budget filmmaking background, and
Right.
so when you're working with low and no budget film, you want to take stock at what you have at your disposal. And a great example of this is Kevin Smith's first film, Clerks. And so he was working in a convenience store, and that's what he had. That's what he had at his disposal. So he knew that whatever story he was going to tell, it was going to involve a convenience store. And so that's kind of the approach I took when I started working on my visual novels.
Mhm.
I scoured the internet looking for free Creative Commons resources, public domain resources, open source, free and open source resources to take advantage of. And I knew after I collected everything I could find that whatever story I was going to tell would be told around these things. And so it's definitely possible to tell a story, to tell a good story, to make a good game on a shoestring budget or even less than that. And
Yeah.
sometimes I would add that even having such constraints can not only not, make a game bad, but it can make a game extraordinary. Like,
hmm
sometimes, and as crazy as this may sound, sometimes having restraints can really bring out a person's creativity.
Oh, for
It's
sure.
it's kind of similar to the expression, you don't want to back a person or an animal into a corner,
Yep.
because that's when they become their most dangerous. Well, sometimes an artist, when they feel like they're backed into a corner, that can be when they're most creative. So don't let that stop you, man. If you have a dream, pursue that shit, man. Just pursue it and go at it. Just go at it. Don't let nothing stop you. Don't let nothing
Yeah.
stop you. Don't let naysayers. Don't let your budget. But again, you are gonna have to be a bit realistic as well. So you can't say, for example, if I'm on a shoestring budget or no budget at all, I can't say that. Okay, I'm going to have this amazing visual novel with hand drawn original sprites, original characters, I should say. Boy,
Well,
amazing voice actors. That's not going to happen. That's obviously not going to
yeah.
happen. I'm using stock characters. Maybe I can provide the voices. Maybe if I'm really nice and some of my friends want to help me out, I could ask them to help me do some voice work. But
Mhm.
it's not going to. I'm not getting Seth MacFarlane to do the voice for my characters. I'm and so, but that's just that there are concessions you have to take, and I feel like it's real worth it. And I think I mentioned this to you before in our first interview, but I can't remember if I did or didn't. But I'll bring it up again just in case. What really made me want to get into visual novels? What inspired
Mhm.
me to were two games, Clannad
Right.
and Doki Doki Literature Club. But the game that inspired me to make, or to show me that I was able to make one if I wanted to, there was a game
Mhm.
called Cool It Garden Society, and it was made using old public domain photos of a famous estate, a famous mansion in upstate New York as the background, as the setting. But
Cool.
that's what really inspired me to want to or show me that I could make a visual novel. And that's a great example of how you can take advantage of free resources to bring a game to life.
hmm you know what, man? The point you made too about just constraining the vision is so huge too, because it's easy for people to be like, oh, I'm gonna make an MMORPG with 400 enemies and 20 different classes, and it's kind of like, well, yeah, you can do that. It costs $1 billion, right? So yeah, keeping things simple and achievable is good too, because like when you hit your goals, it feels good. And yeah, man, you're right. You don't need a massive budget all the time. It makes having something will make life a little easier, but you're right, man. Sometimes you got to use what you got, and there's a ton of free resources out there.
So one big issue is snowballing.
Hmm.
Is snowballing. You have to be able to, have the self-discipline to keep yourself in check, to keep your idea in check, so it doesn't get too big. It does to the point where it becomes unmanageable, unachievable. Otherwise, on the one hand, you're gonna spend so much time working on it, which nothing necessarily wrong with that. Two, you're gonna run the risk of burning yourself out. So you make make it too big, especially if you're a one-man person. Oh, I'm sorry, not a one-man person, a one-man team working on this. You're going to burn yourself out. So I would say you have to keep it in check. You have to keep it in check, and you also have to be able to pace yourself too. One of the things I'm always worried about is just becoming burnt out. Burnt out. And that's one of the reasons why you see on my channel, I talk about different stuff. Like, one day you'll come to my channel, you'll see, a video on UFOs, and another day you'll see, Beavis and Butthead, or some other time you'll see talking about indie games and other stuff as well. Because I want to be able to talk about whatever I want to talk about, and I feel like, focusing just on one thing, no, that would lead me to a burnout. And then, but in addition to that, man, having a too big of a project or unrealistically big project can lead to a burnout as well, or a feeling of being overwhelmed, I would say. I would say it's good to keep things in the scale. And, there's nothing wrong with growing your project, I would say. There's nothing wrong with making it bigger, but, you want to be realistic. You want to try to keep it in the scale.
I agree with that completely. Yeah, especially for one-man teams. And yeah, man, with like burnout and stuff like that, I've learned over the years, it's kind of like, get to bed at the same time every night. It's sort of like past a certain hour, I just don't work. Sunday's usually a half day. It's kind of like, take time off. Got to pace yourself for sure.
And you definitely got to take mental health days too, man. You got to take care of yourself. You got to pace yourself. And sometimes you just got to do something stupid, man. Like play a game, watch watch a cartoon. Just sit around all day and binge watch YouTube and eat potato chips on a couch, man. You got to do something. You got to, as important as it is to work, you also got to take time away from that as well. It's kind of like, think of it like this. You're in a relationship. You love somebody, they love you. You really care a lot about them. But if you spend all your time around that person, there's some issues that can happen because of that. They say, distance makes the heart grow fonder. And it's not just with human relationships. I find it also is true for our other passions in life as well. Like, our projects, our hobbies and such. So that's just one thing I like to recommend as well. Taking time away, touch grass, as the kids say.
Yeah, I got some time, probably take a break in August. I've one exciting thing I got going on is I'm working with someone out of I think South Carolina. He's making a trailer for the game for the Atari VCS launch. So we're crunching to get that done, but that's going to be pretty cool. And yeah, I'm going to take a break after that because it's a bit of a push.
And with that out of the way, do you have any questions for me?
No, not really, man. It's getting a little late here, and this has been really awesome. I really appreciate you chatting again.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, man. Always a pleasure to have you here. So yeah, if you don't have any questions, I will close us off here. And so I'm going to close this out. Give me a moment. Stick around. Give me a moment, and I'll give you a proper goodbye once I close this out. And with that out of the way, I want to thank Jamil for joining us today. And Jamil, would you like to say anything to the audience before you go?
Thanks for watching Coffee with Big Mike, and thanks for having me on Coffee with Big Mike.
All right, and that's going to do it. So, all right, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and waterfowls, thank you so much for joining us as well. Be sure to check out Superstar Shooter 16 at the link below, and if you can't buy it but would still like to support Jamil, be sure to wishlist it. Wishlisting games are a great way to support indie developers. Also, be sure to follow Superstar Shooter 16 on Twitter at the link below. Special thanks to Fran, who does a wonderful job doing my art. She's back on Twitter, so please give her a follow. A special thanks to all my friends on Twitter. I wouldn't be here without you all. And most importantly, a special thank you to all of you for watching. Please like this video if you liked it. Dislike it if you dislike it. Feel free to comment below and let me know what you think. And if you like my content, please subscribe and turn your notifications on. Until next time, fam, just remember, be yourself and you'll be awesome. Peace out!